the strength of the youth he had long lost. "Au secours! Au secours!" she cried, and then, in her extremity, called in English, "Help! Help!" Already she could feel the hot breath of her captor on her cheek, could see his dark eyes looking down at her as he forced her head back against his shoulder, and then, when she felt almost faint from the horror of it, help came unexpectedly. Quite suddenly, a dark shadow seemed to blot out the light as she struggled, panted, and cried. One moment she was captive, the next moment she was free. Freed so quickly that she staggered and almost fell. But to her surprise, she saw that he who had held her at his mercy was now at the mercy of another. A tall man, so tall, so broad-shouldered that the old roué seemed but a pygmy in his hands. "This man is molesting you, mademoiselle?" the newcomer asked. "Oui, monsieur." Iona's answer was barely a whisper between her lips, which were quivering. The Frenchman struggled like a rat held beneath the paws of a cat. "Lâchez-moi, canaille! Lâchez-moi!" he cried. But he was as impotent and powerless as Iona had been but a few seconds before. He screamed, a scream of rage and terror, as the big man picked him up by the scruff of the neck and the seat of his breeches and flung him into the gutter. There was a splash and a squelch of mud and filth as he sprawled on his back in the dirty, polluted water, his silk-stockinged legs in the air. He looked so comical with his face distorted with rage, his wig askew revealing his bald head, that for a moment Iona felt the laughter swell in her throat. And then she was aware that her heart was beating quickly, and that she was still trembling a little from her fright. She turned towards her rescuer. "Thank you, sir, thank you," she said. And even as the words fell from her lips, she was aware that unwittingly she had spoken in English. She was answered in the same language. "I am glad that I could be of assistance, mademoiselle." If the words were formal, the tone in which the stranger spoke them was even more so. Instinctively, Iona felt that, though he still stood there, he had withdrawn himself from her presence. She glanced up at his face, and knew that, having been of service, her rescuer was anxious to efface himself. She could not have explained why she knew this, for the man who had saved her from the unwelcome attentions of the Frenchman made no effort to withdraw into the shadows, nor was his three-cornered hat pulled low over his eyes, yet Iona was convinced that there was some mystery about him. He was handsome, she thought, perhaps the most handsome man she had ever seen. Yet there was such an air of aloof frigidity both in his expression and in his chiselled features, that the words of gratitude which she would have spoken died on her lips. She felt somehow that they would sound false, for there was something so cold and imperious about this stranger that she felt only humiliated that it should have been necessary for him to champion her. His clothes were plain, so plain that Iona was sure that they had been chosen for that reason. He wore no jewellery, and yet she was sure that this too was deliberate. She had looked at him for but a second, and yet she felt that she had taken in so much and yet had learned nothing. Without speech or gesture, she knew that he was urging her to go, and compelled by some force she could not attempt to understand or explain, she obeyed. She curtsied, he bowed, and then Iona was hurrying down the street with not even a backward glance at the spectacle of the amorous voluptuary picking himself out of the gutter. She moved so quickly that she was breathless when, after taking a turning to the right, she found herself at her destination. She raised her hand to the knocker on the front door, and then waited until she got her breath. For the first time she looked behind her, to see only another street as dingy and as dirty as the one she had just left. She knocked on the door. It was opened almost immediately, as if someone had been waiting there for her arrival. Iona stepped forward, and as she did so, the door was shut behind her and bolted. She stood uncertainly in what seemed to her a vacuum of darkness, and then a wheezing voice said, "Ici, mademoiselle." A door was opened ahead, and now there was light, the light of 4 candles on a table in the centre of a room. There were 6 men seated round it, and as Iona entered, blinking a little after the darkness of the outer hall, 2 rose, one moving into the shadows at the far end of the room, while the other turned towards her. With a little smile of pleasure, she recognised a friendly face. "I have come, Colonel,"